Yeah, and so the last game that we want to cover here is Florida versus Texas A&M. I think it's been so covered between On3 and ESPN and SEC Network and the likes, and so we saved. Some could say the best for last. Some could say the worst for last. But a lot to take away from that game on both sides, from the team in College Station and the team in Gainesville. So when you were watching that at 3:30 and it was delayed to finish up later, what were your thoughts, Hunter?
I was glad to get a break. I think Florida's probably glad to get a little bit of a break there because it was a tough game for Florida, man. But start with some positives. I was impressed by Texas A&M, not because they were playing against Florida. No matter who they were playing against, Texas A&M looked impressive to me. The offensive line played to what they can play. The defensive line played to what we expected at the beginning of the year. I mentioned in the preview for this game that I don't think that A&M's defense is as good as it's been advertised. They proved me wrong this game and played as well as they needed to. But offensively, I think was the biggest standout. Marcel Reed coming in for injured Connor Weigman and playing like it was his team. The playbook looked designed for him. We saw 13 carries from him for over 80 yards and a touchdown. It felt like it was his game, honestly.
Yeah, no, it definitely felt like it was his game. And, A&M came out 20 unanswered points in the first half. And Marcel Reed provides this spark. And everybody can get behind the young backup quarterback coming in, trying to prove himself on the road in a big game. And he did just that. I could have done without the moaning on the audio for that juke move. But while it's very impressive, I don't know if it required that type of sound effect. But 2 touchdowns on the air, just great performance across the board. Le'Veon Moss was standout guy, 110 yards. And, more of the same story for Florida on the other side. Because of the success of A&M in the passing game, defense is struggling. Because of the success in the running game, defense is struggling. To Florida's defense, they didn't give up. They got 14 points in the third quarter. The scoreboard at the end of the game looks much closer than how that game played. But there is some things to build on, but I haven't seen a ton of good quarters of football from Florida thus far this season.
No, a good quarter at all from really any unit on the field, to be honest. I don't know who had a good day. Maybe Elijah Badger had a good day. He can go home with the gold star for Florida because no one else really earned one. When we're looking at Florida, I guess the worst part I'd say was the O-line. In the D-line, maybe in the trenches is where they lost the game against Miami and where they lost here. They're third to last in the SEC for rush yards, looking at the O-line with only 357 on the season. They almost gave up that many in this game. They gave up 310 rush yards in this game. They barely even have more than that on the year. And they're second to last in points per game on offense. Defensively, they're last in the SEC with the most yards given up through 3 games. They're 8th from the bottom in just Power 4 teams in the country for yards given up on the season, 8th to the bottom.
Is that above Wake Forest?
I think they are above Wake Forest. They are definitely above Wake Forest.
Okay.
I don't have everyone that they're ahead of, but
right.
I know Wake Forest is below them. But Lagway was bad, Mertz was bad. This dual threat quarterback situation isn't doing favors for either of them because they're not able to build any momentum going into it. Their O-line's bad, so they're sitting back there and just taking hits. It's just you're trotting a guy out to get shellacked, I guess, behind the O-line.
Pretty much, and I'm not a Florida fan. I'm not I don't have any fandom. I like certain players, and I like to see players do well in the conference. So I'd love to see a close game on both sides, and it comes down to the wire. We could say, hey, both teams look good, both teams played well, and it's confusing because Graham Mertz, he went 12 for 15, he had 1 touchdown, he had a pick, and then like you said, you bring in Lagway. It's like you don't get to prepare the week knowing that you're the captain, you run the ship. DJ Lagway keeps getting thrown into these games when the team is down or they need a spark, and that's not fair to a true freshman Gatorade Player of the Year who's just trying to build his career, and he knows what situation he signed up for coming into playing for Florida this year. But if you're going to roll with a guy, just roll with a guy, and maybe it's you start Graham Mertz one game, you don't win that game, you start Lagway the next game, but this flip-flopping back and forth to me would create this feeling of, even if I'm doing well, I can get yanked. Or if the defense doesn't do their part, which they clearly have shown they can't do it, I'm going to get blamed. I'm going to get yanked. And then, Lagway's he throws an interception, and I don't even blame him because he's just trying to drive the ball down the field and put the team in a position to win like every other quarterback does, but it's just the timing of the changes to me are a little bit frustrating. And I felt like he did enough to earn the opportunity to start this game just to switch up what's been going on from my perspective.
Yeah, you need to give them the confidence to play. I mean, not to talk NFL, but you saw Max Crosby hyping up Gardner Minshew after an interception. Like, hey, man, you're fine. You know, like on this Florida team, you don't feel like that. You mess up and, quarterback switch for the next drive because you messed up. It's like
Right.
you don't have any stability anywhere going forward. Like, I don't know who the answer is because neither played good. But I think there's if we can't look at one unit and say it played good, there's a guy at top that you have to take that has to take the fall for all of this. And he said he's not worried for his job. I think that his job will be done sooner than later because they have a lot of recruits in the pipeline that if they're going to come play for looking at their schedule, like a 2-10 team, like you don't want to finish the year like that and keep a guy around.
Right. And it's, you have to look at the top, right? This is the person who makes the most money on the team. You would think NIL packages are NIL packages. I don't look at all the valuations, but Billy Napier is the highest paid coach in that room. And it's underwhelming. This is Florida. This isn't Mississippi State. No shade to Hail State. This is a premier program. This is supposed to be the best team in Florida, and it's just like what we're seeing on the field is not a good product. There clearly is talent here. You see the talent around him. And I think what Billy is saying is what he has to say. Like he can't go up there and say, "Oh, I'm worried about my job. I'm worried if we don't score 21 points, I'm gonna lose my job," because that shows signs of weakness. And I think he probably can't say that just because of things in his contract, but I think his body language to me in those press conferences speaks more to how he feels. And I think that body language carries over to how they practice. I'm not at the practice, but if the coach is constantly being fielded questions about his job, it's like having a boss that is not the most qualified for the job. Like you're like, all right, I'm gonna do my part, but if we don't perform, like I know you ain't talking about nothing. So it's like a slow killing, just rip the Band-Aid off at this point.
It's not going to get any better. I mean, next week is the most winnable game for Florida, playing at Mississippi State, and then they have UCF after a bye week. But UCF looks good, beat down TCU this past week. So it's like I don't know where they go from here, what the answer is. I'm glad I'm not in a position to have to make that decision, but something has to change. There's no energy on the field. For Texas A&M, though, there's some decisions. Let's say that all things the same after this Bowling Green game next week. Weigman's healthy. Marcel Reed is healthy. Who do you start going into Arkansas?
Yeah, if it's up to me, I'm gonna look at just how the team practices. I would make it an open competition this week, and just kind of see who they rally behind. If it's a push, I'm giving it to Marcel. If it's clearly that Weigman deserves it, I would ride with Weigman. But if it's just my own decision outside of the practice aspect, I got to go with the guy who got the first SEC win of the season and the guy that showed you he could do something on the ground, 83 rushing yards, and as well as in the air. And so, like I said, if it was up to me, I'm going Marcel. But I think the fair thing might be to kind of let this play out in practice, as it helps both of them stay hungry, stay ready, and kind of put the team in a better position practice overall.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's still up for debate. It's up for interpretation from the coaches. I don't think either guy that they trot out there against Arkansas, Bowling Green, I think is a good opportunity to let Marcel Reed play the game and let Weigman recover further instead of putting extra pressure on it for a game that you should win pretty easily. I don't want to say easily. Bowling Green, fine. But when it comes to Arkansas week, I think it's up to whichever quarterback has earned it more at that point. It's hard to look at one game versus another because the rest of the team's play was worse in that opener with Notre Dame. They brought it together for this Florida game. So it's hard to compare apples and oranges there. But I think that there's a positive. It's a better situation. Florida's in this position, like which guy's going to go out there and play isn't going to play worse. Texas A&M is maybe in a position looking forward where they're like, okay, we have two guys who we know can play ball.
Yeah, and to Connor Weigman's defense, he was in an AP level class playing Notre Dame, And I think Marcel was in a level 2 class playing Florida from a defensive perspective, just given the stats.
Yeah.
So I listen, I'm very impressed. I understand riding with him, but I also maybe I have a little bit of empathy with what Weigman had to face week 1 and what I believe Notre Dame's defense to be. So
okay. Any keys for Florida going forward aside from the coaching and sticking with a quarterback? For me, it's cleaning up penalties. They let a couple drives extend because of penalties. They did it with Miami. They did it this week. I think if you can clean that up, the rest of the things maybe will fall in place.
Yeah, I think it's 2 things, and I'm kind of hitting on the points that you had mentioned. But number 1 is establish the run game. I mean, you mentioned that they are a little bit over 300 yards this season on the rushing side. So if you can establish the run game and establish control of the clock, that allows you to control more of the game to put you in a better position to win. The second one is the penalty side, like you said. If you listened to our episode last week, penalties are not a skill thing. That's a discipline thing. So just do the right things, hold the hands inside when you're blocking, obviously, make sure you're not jumping on false starts, no jumping in terms of encroachment, just do the right things. And that is a nice booster to hopefully produce better football. On the offensive side, like I said, I think it's the run game is the big one. And, keep the ball in the team that's wearing blue and white. Turn the ball over a little bit less. I think they've turned the ball over every game besides Samford. So less turnovers. It's one thing if your offense can't score, which is not fully the case for Florida. It's the turnovers. It's the threes and outs and whatnot. So those are a couple areas that I would focus on for Florida going into this game or going into the rest of the season. Defensively, that's a whole different beast.
Yeah, there's too much that you can do in 1 week. It's funny. I saw Kalen DeBoer say this. Tyler Booker mentioned DeBoer has this thing. It's TNT takes no talent. You have to be good at the things that take no talent. Jumping off sides, keeping your hands in the box. Like it takes no talent, so you have to be good at it. So that's the thing for Florida. They're messing up on things that it's not indicative of their skill level at all. It's just discipline and things that are the fundamentals and getting through it. So hopefully good things ahead. They both have winnable games this week. So we should see a win from both of these teams. Hopefully, unless Mississippi State can do something this week defensively.
Hey, either way, it's an SEC win. So we'll see. We know where Mississippi State stands on the defensive side, and we shall see. We'll see for Florida, and congratulations to Mike Elko, second win in the Mike Elko head coaching era, first SEC win for him as a head coach. So more props to him. I'm always going to lead on the positive side. So happy for Mike.